so
Hi, I'm Paula Overby, candidate for U.S. Senate.
and my name is Dani.
So we're here today to talk about
J.K. Rowling's tweets. As you
Yeah.
can see from the title of this video, we're going to be reacting to her. It's kind of recent. She started
it's
this.
fairly recent, yeah.
Yeah, she started this whole, Twitter uproar like back in, was it June?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously because she's really well known because of the Harry Potter series,
Yeah, absolutely.
the books and the movies as well. But it's a controversy that's been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, and I'm basically gonna be reading all of her tweets, and we're gonna be reacting to it. But admittedly, this is something that is basically like inescapable. Pretty much everybody has heard about this to some level, and because you can't escape it on social media, it's like they keep talking about it all the time.
They keep talking about it.
So our reaction is going to be like not truly authentic because we've heard about it over the last couple of months, but we are going to just. I haven't read all of them like completely, and I haven't seen the reaction to it. So that's basically what we're going to be discussing.
But we're also trans women, right? So
Absolutely.
we get engaged these narratives on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
At least I do. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, and like because being trans, like this is like our norm. So naturally, when I like see articles or people talking about trans issues, I naturally want to know what's going on.
Yep.
So.
And when someone as popular as J.K. Rowling's touches on those issues, then it becomes part of the national spotlight, right?
Yeah.
Even the global spotlight.
Absolutely. She's one of like the most like followed people on Twitter.
Yeah.
I think she has like 14 million people on her Twitter. But yeah, when you have that many people who are, reading everything that you post, of course when you post something like this, it's gonna be automatic newsworthy.
And part of it too, I think, is that we attach certain credibility to an argument based on a person's notoriety. I guess,
Absolutely,
right?
And also, this is. We can talk about this a little bit. Later, but J.K. Rowling is a liberal person.
I would say yes.
And
she's pretty well educated on.
She is.
She's
She's well educated,
right?
and she knows what she's talking about most of the time.
She does, right? She's not just talking off the top of her head. That's right.
Yes, and, she's a smart woman.
She's an incredible author, right? How many books has she written? In the Harry Potter
But that's what we have to also keep in mind too. She's a fantasy author. She's not a political commentator. You know what I mean? It's like it's okay to have political opinions, but obviously with something like this, you're going to be held accountable, and that's basically what we're talking about is like the standard that we hold for certain people.
Right.
Because let's be honest, if this was a conservative who was saying these things on their Twitter, like people would be like, okay, that's expected. Like moving on. But when it's J.K. Rowling and she's like a hyper liberal character and she's saying these things, people are shocked. So anyways, are you ready to get into it?
Some people are shocked. Some of us are not so shocked.
Okay. Well, let's see after we reread a few of these. So. Okay, so basically how this got started was J.K. Rowling retweeted an op-ed piece that was basically discussing people who menstruate. And people who menstruate.
Oh.
And she in the tweet she says, people who menstruate, I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wombin, wompund, womud. She's basically hinting that, like, why are we not using the word woman? And, she basically, the op-ed article didn't think that was appropriate because it's exclusionary to trans people. So she got a lot of backlash from that. And basically for that reason exactly is that it's disrespectful to trans people, and like trans people are women, and when you say people who menstruate, that's just more accurate to what we're talking about. And so
definitely, yeah.
And so her next tweet was, if sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth.
I would agree with that.
And she goes on to say, the idea that women like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is nonsense.
I think I would agree with that too.
Absolutely.
I think I've always agreed with that.
And the last thing on that thread of tweets, I respect every trans person's right to live any way they feel authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so. So she packs a lot in those few tweets. Basically what she's talking about is the difference between gender and biological sex. And she is basically reaffirming that a biological woman's experience in womanhood is, in a way, I don't know, she's hinting that it's more authentic, but she's just basically saying that there is a very clear difference between trans women and real women. Biological women.
Biological women.
Biological women. So what's your reaction to that, Paula?
Well, I've always held that position, right? I've always advocated for a society that has space for transgender women or transgender people, right? It's also transgender men. We don't have that technique for separating transgender men from biological men, and unfortunately we don't really have that discussion even, right? Which is another dynamic that really goes completely unnoticed. But I think, I mean, you yourself come from a culture that allowed for that space, right? I mean, that's something I've heard you say before.
Absolutely.
So cultures that recognize 4 or 5 different genders. So I think part of the problem with this narrative, the trans narrative that's being pushed today, is this idea that it's still reinforcing this idea that we only have 2 genders, right? Even though we have people that are trying to create this non-binary space.
It's so, I mean, from the outside,
What's your reaction?
Well, okay, well, first let me start before I talk about her tweets. Do I think J.K. Rowling is transphobic? No, I don't. Do I think she's an ally to the LGBT community? Yes, I think she is. If I'm asked just on a basic level about what I think about, her tweets in regards to the trans community, here's the thing. She's educated. She's a grown woman. She obviously knows women's issues very well. And I personally don't think that there's really much wrong with what she said. She's pointing out very obvious things. She's pointing out factual information that, she's talking about the science of it. You know what I mean? Like, she's talking about the science of gender. Am I, identify as a transgender woman? Am I biologically female? No. I'm not able to get pregnant. I do not menstruate. I do not produce the hormone estrogen naturally. Like I'm not biologically a woman, but when you're talking about, you know, biological sex, that's a little bit different from the gender that you identify with. So because if we're talking about gender, then yes, I identify more on the feminine spectrum.
Well, we're reaching a point though where the broader narrative is to define gender as something totally cognitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't agree with that, right? I think there's a substantial difference between testosterone and estrogen.
Yes.
And I think that a majority of transgender women that have had that experience would agree with me.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think that this is causing such a controversy, and why do people keep talking about? And the whole reason why I wanted to talk about this with Paula today was because, you know, you've been asked about it, I've been asked about it. I honestly thought this would have gone away by now, but it hasn't, and she's still being canceled online repeatedly. And in a way, she's still kind of digging herself into a deeper and deeper hole.
As am I right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm somewhat agreeing with her.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
But as trans people, aren't our opinions more valid?
I should think so.
Especially
yes.
on issues having to
Right.
do with trans issues. And let's be honest, anytime there is an issue of trans, it is an automatic political issue.
It is, and to me, it isn't just an issue of transgender. I had to battle against social norms most of my life to accept myself as I know myself to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what, to me, what a trans woman is.
Mm-hmm.
But we have, many cultural narratives in our society, and she's from Britain, but I have similar issues in Britain,
Mm-hmm.
of gender or sex segregation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sex discrimination, issues of employment,
Mm-hmm.
issues of violence, issues of family issues,
Mm-hmm.
custody.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the dynamic that we live in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to say that people can move fluidly between those two different environments or social constructs is a difficult argument,
Mm-hmm.
right? To say, well, and this is the challenge that TERFs, for example, trans-exclusive radical feminists will say, you can't have men going into female spaces just
Mm-hmm.
because they say they're a female.
Yeah.
Or that they feel like a woman. And that was not my experience as a transgender woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any casual attitude about it. It was my life and my life struggle.
Absolutely, yes. And that kind of brings up another point is, do you think J.K. Rowling is a TERF?
Definitely not. No, I don't. I don't see her position as exclusive of transgender women. The transgender narrative has been expanded to the point where it's excluding gender. It's excluding sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sex is the part that isn't real, and gender is the part that is.
Yes.
Okay, and
That's the liberal mindset, yes.
that's the liberal mindset, yes. And I can't identify with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, sex is very real, and
Mm-hmm.
to me, I see very legitimate differences between the average female and the average male.
Mm-hmm.
That's very real,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And this transgender narrative that's being created, and even beyond that, this non-binary narrative that it's all a spectrum and sex is not real, I can't see that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe in that.
Well, like we said in our previous video, the non-binary experience is in a way polar opposite from a trans experience, because that's part of the hypocrisy of like what we experience is that yes, we believe in gender, yes, we enforce like the binary, we enforce like we do believe in
Right.
biological sex. That's part of the reason why that we transition.
Exactly,
yes,
because we believe it's real.
exactly. and the transgender experience, like when you take hormones, it changes you neurologically. You know, it changes like the mind, but it does change the body, yes. But does that mean that all of a sudden you can menstruate? No, you can't. So that's
Right.
like that's basically what J.K. Rowling is saying, is that, you know, that trans women, the difference between trans women and women, and she's just pointing it out. I mean,
And that's where I might disagree with the kind of the assertiveness of that argument. You know, you can't really define a woman according to whether or not she menstruates either, right? Because a lot of women don't menstruate. Some women
Yes.
don't menstruate.
Yes, and people brought up that, yeah.
Some
and,
women,
like,
and there are intersex people, right, that don't really have any biological sex at all. That's another issue that still has yet to be resolved from a cultural standpoint and a policy standpoint. So,
I mean,
so I disagree with
you,
her on that.
if I'm sure if she were to hear that, then she would probably bring up the argument of chromosomes. Then, you know, like
she might.
I mean,
you know,
if that's what we're getting down to.
That's what we're getting down to. And that seems to be where her arguments are extremely weak, is this idea of trying to create a clear biological framework, which is definitely not clear. So that's where I see the big weakness in her argument. But I do tend to agree with her on the other side of it, that you can't exclude gender or sex either, right? That gender is now going to replace sex. I have a hard time with that too.
Yes. Well, anyways,
So-
you brought up how we should get past all this. I mean, we're doing it right now. When you're hearing the opinions and the voices of real trans people, and you are listening to them, because what we're not hearing is enough trans voices in response to all of this. So
And this is, I mean, I live in a very patriarchal society, right? That has been really quite abusive to women for hundreds of years. That's changing, it's improving, but it's still an issue, right?
I mean, the fact that everyone like discussing this and for so long, in a way, it is kind of a good thing, because it's bringing to attention a lot of issues that people were not familiar with, you know, and a lot of
I was just going to say that myself.
And just the fact that people debate it, I mean, it's kind of it's a good thing, you know.
So
People are
I
educating
agree.
themselves.
So we have to continue having these discussions. I appreciate her coming forward. I think it's courageous. I think, you know, it's obviously a discussion that's not been resolved, right? I mean, and this discussion is going to continue on.
Yeah, and I've said this in our last videos too, is like, we have to hear opinions that we don't necessarily agree with, and we have to let J.K. Rowling, you know, say these things. You know, she's not a person that we should be canceling over something like this. She has done so much for so many people. And, you know, and so many people are fans of the books, and like they're taking her out of, you know, libraries, and it's like things like that we shouldn't be going to that level of canceling somebody's whole career over tweets.
So I don't want, I said earlier, I agree that sex is real. I do agree that men are basically, on average, very different from women on a lot of different metrics. But I don't want to do the same thing the TERFs did, right?
Yes.
The trans-exclusive radical feminists, and become the female exclusive radical trans people.
What's that acronym, Paula?
What would that be? FERTs? I don't want to become a FERT, right?
Yes. Yeah, you heard it here first.
I think we just cloned that phrase.
Well, I think that's a good point to leave off on.
But I think that's a good point to leave on, yep, and we can come back to that.
Yes, we can. Yeah, we do plan on making more trans-related videos. We're talking about doing a video on trans people competing in gendered sports.
Yes, we'll have to definitely follow up with that one. That's a complicated argument, too.
Yeah, that deserves a whole video. Anyways, well, please like and subscribe down below, and you can find me, Dani May Austin, on Instagram, Dani Dani, and May like the month, and Austin like Austin, Texas. And Paula?
And right now I'm getting ready for the August 11th primary. I'm Paula Overby, candidate for U.S. Senate. So be sure to get out and vote.
Thanks for watching. We all set? That's recording?
We are filming. Yes.
Oh, good.
Introductions?
Yeah. I mean, do we have to introduce ourselves like extensively? Can I just say like, I'm Dani?
Do we really have to introduce ourselves?
Like, no, I mean, like, you know what I mean? Do I have to say like, you know, I'm Dani, I'm like a local artist?
Can
and
introduce yourself however you like.
Okay, good. Okay, ready? 3.
Do you mind if I tell them that I'm a candidate for U.S. Senate?
No, absolutely. Just like, yeah, that you have to do that, right?
Well, I don't have to, no. Could keep this completely separate.
Okay.